along and talk about telephone technique. Now, in regard to telephone technique, we've taken this all-important 30 seconds and we've divided it into 3 distinct segments. What are they? First segment, your first 16 words. Second segment, a series of power statements. And the third segment is closing questions. So let's look at those 3 distinct segments. Segment number 1, your first 16 words. Your first 16 words should go something like this. Now, don't get hung up on the 16 words. Maybe yours in your company will be 20. Maybe it'll be 18. But it shouldn't be more than 20 or 22. And we prefer the 16. Now, listen to my 16 words. Hello, Bruce. Yeah, this is Gary Kinder calling. Is this a convenient time for you to talk? See, the second word out of my mouth was what? The prospect's first name. Now, don't use a prospect's first name unless you know his or her first name. If you know for sure what they're called, then you go with that first name. But don't try to fake it. Here's somebody that's Robert Watson. Don't say, hello, Bob. Maybe he doesn't go by Bob. Maybe he goes by Robert. I know some Robert Watsons that go by Tiny. So you call them by whatever their name is. Now, do you remember? Do you remember what I said earlier about know your stuff, know who you're stuffing, know as much about that prospect as possible, right? Now, when you get a referred lead, what's one of the most important pieces of information you're going to pick up from the referral? Nickname, or what they go by. Because the second word out of your mouth is going to be what? Hello, Bruce, this is Gary Kinder calling. Is this a convenient time for you to talk? So up front, we say your first 16 words should be the prospect's name. Hello, Joe, this is Gary Kinder calling, pronouncing your name very clearly. Is this a convenient time for you to talk? Now, when you say, is this a convenient time for you to talk, what's the prospect going to say? He or she can only say, what? 3 things. What are they? Yes, no, or most of the time, well, I guess so, what's this about? So if they say yes, they've given you permission to talk. If they say, what's this about, they've given you permission to talk. If they say no, what are you going to say? You're going to say, oh, I'm sorry, when would be convenient for me to call back? Would it be okay if I called an hour from now? Or would you prefer I call you tomorrow about this same time? Which time would be best for you? And you know what they'll say? Many, many times, they'll say, well, what's this about? And they've given you permission to talk. So it's always courteous to say, is this a convenient time for you to talk? We call that a temperature question. Now, if you call up your best friend or somebody that knows you real well and you say, hello, Joe, and he says, yeah, you say, how you doing? That's a temperature question. But you don't call up a referral or an acquaintance or somebody you don't know and say, how you doing? You ask them a temperature question, but not that temperature question. That's getting too familiar too fast. So you say, hello, Bruce, yeah, this is Gary Kinder calling. Is this a convenient time for you to talk? First 16 words, vital. Have them ready. Have them ready to roll. Then, following their giving you permission to talk, then you come back with the second segment, which is what? A series of power statements. Power statements. Now, let me give you some power statements. In fact, you'll see some of them there in your workbook, but let's talk about it. See, one of the oldest power statements in history is, I have an idea that's been of great interest and value to other successful people like yourself, and I'd like to get together with you and share the idea with you. See, that's one of the oldest power statements in history. Let me tell you about probably the most powerful power statement there is, and that is, I need to see you. So if in your power statements you can work that in, I need to see you. That's particularly good when you're calling a policyholder. I need to see you. Or even calling an acquaintance, and you say, we have a new plan, or we have a service, and I'd like to get together with you and show you how it works. I need to see you. It's a powerful power statement. Now, let me tell you another power statement. Very important. Most companies have tremendous name identification. And when you use your company's name then it's got power in it. For an example, my brother and I, as you well know, many of you know, we spent many years with the Equitable Life in New York. And so our first power statement over the phone, after they gave us permission to talk, would be something like this. Well, Joe, well, Bruce, and there's his name again, or her name, there's his name again, Bruce, 18th word out of my mouth, his name. Well, Bruce, I'm with the Equitable here in Bloomington. I'm with the Equitable here in Bloomington. You see how that rings? Now, I say here in Bloomington because they like to know that in Bloomington, Indiana, or Bloomington, Minnesota, or Bloomington, Illinois, that I live right here. I'm not going away. I'm not calling from out of town. I'm right here. I'm part of you. I'm part of this community. I'm with the Equitable here in Bloomington. That's a power statement because I use a power name identification, and I tell them I'm right here locally. Now, I want to give you what we think is probably the toughest power statement there is to object to, and it's this. We have a unique service. We have a unique service that's been of great interest and value to other successful people like you. And I need to see you and show you how it works. You see those power statements? You see those power statements? Now, a lot of people say, we have a new plan. That's a power statement. We have a new plan. Currently paying 9% tax deferred. See, that's a power statement. Now, the first 16 words, you should rarely, if ever, vary. But the power statements you use in the second segment, they vary with the prospect, whether it's a referred lead, it varies. For an example, if I've got a good referred lead, I'll call Bruce and say, after I announce my company, I'm with the Equitable here in Bloomington, and Bruce, I'm calling because of Tom Smith. That's a power statement, because Tom Smith is somebody he identifies with, you see? So I use that referral's name. It's a power statement. Now, in your workbook, you'll see a model pre-approach to a acquaintance, a model pre-approach to a referred lead, a model pre-approach over the phone to a person you've sent a letter to. You'll see in there a model telephone pre-approach to a professional, a doctor, a dentist. You'll see in there a model pre-approach to business. But let me ask you this question. How many of you send out letters in advance of telephoning? How many of you do that? Gee, that's good. Now, let me ask you this. How many of you follow those letters up with telephone calls? How many of you do that? Sure. And I hope you call up whether you've asked for a response or whether you haven't, and I hope you call up whether you got a response or whether you didn't. Now, who can tell me what their first 16 words and some power statements are after you've sent the letter? Now you're calling up, let's say you're calling up somebody that didn't respond. Who'd like to, Lisa, tell me what you'd say in that situation.
Oh, hi, Gary. My name's Lisa Resnick. How are you?
Fine.
Well, the reason I'm calling this evening is I recently sent you a letter and was just wondering if you received it and had a chance to look over it.
Okay, that's good, but let me ask you a question. We use a series of power statements. Is that right? And now she sent me a letter, and what is she saying? A power statement or a question? She asked me a question. Don't ask questions. You automatically lose control of the interview. You automatically lose control of what you're saying over the phone. See, and most people around this country that send out letters, they'll call up and say, did you get my letter? And see, that'll get you in all kind of trouble. Because what do the people respond? No, I can't remember. When did you send it? Or, well, it's probably junk mail, and my wife throws that all out. Or, no, I don't even pay attention to it. And you're into a conversation. Well, I don't even know if I got it. You know how bad the mail is. I mean, you're into conversations you don't want to be into. So you use a power statement. So how could you take that question and turn it around into a power statement? I recently sent you a letter. And you'll probably recall that in the letter we said, we have a unique service that helps people like yourself better organize their insurance and financial affairs. You follow what I'm saying? You'll state what you stated in the letter. But don't ask them if they got the letter. You don't want to get into that conversation. Now, there's one other little thing that Lisa did. that I'd like to talk about, and that is, she said, my name is. Over the phone, always say what? This is Gary Kinder calling. This is Lisa calling. This is all, and when you meet somebody in person, always say, I am. Rare, you should get away from using my name is. That puts a tag on you. The President of the United States wouldn't call you up and say, my name is. No, he'd say, I am, or this is. You follow? So over the phone, you always want to say, this is. Now, in certain areas, and if you feel comfortable with it, it's okay to say hi, but we prefer in business over the phone almost always to say hello. Rather than say, hi, hi, Gary, this is Lisa calling, I'd prefer you say, hello, Gary, this is Lisa calling. You follow? Very important. So, first 16 words, vital, that's the first segment. A series of power statements that are designed to this particular prospect and to this particular segment of the market that you're calling. And then you use closing questions. Now, the closing questions, they, like the first 16 words, probably shouldn't vary very much. And a closing question goes like this, something like this. We have a unique service that helps people like yourself better organize their insurance and financial affairs. And I need to see you and show you how it works. And I was just wondering, in your line of work, when would be the best time for us to get together? Are mornings or afternoons generally best for you? Or better still, maybe we'd get together one day for lunch. Like next week, how does your schedule look on Tuesday or Thursday? Notice I asked them, how does your schedule look? Notice also I asked for a daytime appointment. See, what we try to get agents to see all over this country is you should ask for daytime appointments because you're going to get enough nighttime appointments asking for daytime. So don't start out asking for nighttime, start out asking for daytime. Now, if the decision makers can't be present during the day, then you'll revert to the nighttime appointment. But always start out, if at all possible, by asking for a daytime appointment, closing with questions. Now, as good as you get at this technique is the prospect on the other end of the line. You get this down real good and your energy's up, you got everything down pat, and boy, it sounds good, and there's power statements are in there, and you close with a question. On the other end of the line, they say, that's the best telephone pre-approach I've ever heard. When could you get over here? Is that what they say? No, they're supposed to resist, aren't they? So what do they say? Give me an objection.